Hey. It is Wednesday night. Hope you guys are doing well. I'm up here in the chat and on the live, as we do every Monday and Wednesday night here on the channel, getting into all the things that you guys like to ask fantastic questions about when it comes to digital assets and all the things kind of forward-looking. Been doing some reflecting over the past few weeks here on and pushing, trying to get everything set up on the wealth management side. And for the family office, we have clients there. We do a lot of consulting at Digital Ascension Group. Need to fix the D on that. Anyway, just there's a lot of people out there that talk about price appreciation in digital assets. And we all want that, right? Like we want coin go up. But what do you do on the other side of that? How do you make sure you don't pay a ton in taxes? How do you make sure that that's secured for your family in the future? How do you make sure that your kids still have ambition and have values and skills and traits that allow them to be successful in life and don't spoil them to the point where they just don't have those things, right? A lot of the time, entrepreneurs that I know that are very successful came from a not wealthy family, and they were able to establish themselves. They found a niche, gained specific knowledge in an industry through working very, very hard. Were broke at least once, sometimes multiple times in their journey, and ended up coming out on top after working years and years and years to get somewhere. And along that journey, a lot of the time, people acquire certain experts, professionals, people with expertise around them that allow them to mitigate taxes and structure their estate and do all the stuff that we work with clients to do for digital assets. And I think, we've been really fortunate in putting together a community that does have some forethought in Beyond Broke Mastermind. And we talk about a lot of this stuff there. And I'm happy to say that over the past couple years, talking about these things, a lot of people really have thought them through, and that they've worked on things and they have a really good idea of where they're going, how they're going to put in place to make sure that these things are structured the right way and that they're set up on the other side of price appreciation. And it's helped that, things have waited as long as they to pop off. But I don't think that's going to be the case a whole lot longer. Ripple case is finally over. We've got a lot of looming things here in macroeconomics that say the end of this year is going to be pretty explosive for a lot of this stuff. So hopefully you got your house in order. You've been diligent. You have put a plan together to make sure that you're successful on the other side of the alt season or whatever else we get here in digital assets. But that's what we're going to run down tonight. So if that's something that you feel like maybe you haven't been as diligent about, if you have questions around what should you be doing, how do you make sure that you set yourself up for success, maybe you do have a big bag and you're excited and you're going to be like, centimillionaire, potentially a billionaire, if things really do pop off the way that we're hoping for, and you don't know anybody that has that type of money. You didn't grow up with that type of money. Wealth management is a skill, and it is passed down. The way that you think through how those things are done. If you're going to be successful, if the money is really going to last, more than just one or two generations, you need to be having those discussions with your children. We just made a parents channel in the Discord and in the mastermind to have a lot of those discussions in there. That was brought to my attention earlier this week that we really hadn't really gone down that rabbit hole. And so I've put things in there that I'm going to do for my son and our family to make sure that he's got enough that he can do anything, but not so much that he doesn't have to do anything. You want to give your children opportunities, but not to the point that they don't have a purpose in life, right? Because if you take the opportunity for them to build their own empire away from them, what are they chasing? But a lot of the time, the fulfillment that you get in life is the pursuit. I've got to a lot. I say a lot. I've gotten to the top of a few mountains in my lifetime. Competed as a bodybuilder when I was younger, and still have some body dysmorphia, just being honest. But you know, I set out for a goal. You know, I thought if I could get to like 215, 220 pounds at 5% body fat, that I would be stoked. Like that was my, like, I will be happy, you know? And I got past that. The last time I competed, I was 230 at 5% body fat in 2019, on a national stage in Miami. Kept chasing more, you know? And then like after that show, I reflected on it and was like, you did it. Cool. Now what? What's the next thing? There's been some other times in my life that I've, you know, said that something would make me happy, and then I get there and the reflecting is nice. Like you feel good for a little bit, and then you realize that it was the journey that you got the fulfillment from, the chase, the pursuit of whatever you were chasing, that really gave you what you were looking for, right? Self-confidence, all those other things. So anyway, chat's running up here. You guys are awesome. Always ask fantastic questions. So we'll go ahead and hop into it. You know, any of the things that I mentioned are fair game. If you want to know what I'm going to do for my son and our family, run that down. But I did, again, post that in the mastermind a little bit earlier today. So anyway, apparently a lot of people did not like the consistent chiming last week with people becoming members, and Kevin gifting all those. So appreciate Kevin on that. Hopefully we don't have as many dings and dongs tonight for people listening, and it's not it doesn't impair your ability to get the information. So anyway, we'll hop in the chat here. Robert, thank you for the super chat, brother. He says smart contracts coming to the XRPL natively. Amendments voting is on the move again. Let's get this party started. What? I haven't looked at the amendments today to see where we are. But things are starting to move again. I see that. Yeah, we've got a few of the fixes here, have a couple more votes toward yes on them, and also digital identity as well. So that's awesome. I forgot, for anybody that doesn't know, you can go review that. You're just going to go to xrpscan.com/amendments, and you'll be able to see what's been proposed and where things are at on that. Sean says, did you catch Michael Gate on Zach? No, I did not, but that's fantastic. Both those individuals are great people. I think Michael is extremely intelligent. His father dealt with macroeconomics, called a lot of things very correctly. I do think that Michael is a bit short-sighted on treasuries, and that he has a bias there. So his fund is literally going to make a ton of money if treasuries do really well. I think he's going to be wrong. I think they're going to save markets, and by proxy going to save treasuries. But I think they're going to do it through stablecoin regulation. But I do think we're going to see some significant volatility in U.S. Treasury markets before they do decide to roll that out. So maybe it'll happen faster than I think, but I do think we're going to in for a lot of volatility here in the short term. I think markets go higher. I think we see them melt up. Just my 2 cents. I could be off. But that's where I think things are headed. I think the Fed is going to pivot on rates, and just unwind the reverse carry trade. So he doesn't believe so. He thinks Japan is going to raise, and they will, U.S. will save our treasury market and let markets collapse. I don't think that's the way this is going to go before an election. I could be wrong. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but great to see that if he was on Zach's show, it's definitely one worth watching. I think that they probably shared some good insights, and that's definitely something I'll have to go watch. And I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. This one's interesting. Avatar 13 says, what Ripple tech is XRP being used? I don't quite understand the question, but I'm going to try to manipulate it in a way that makes sense. You said, what Ripple tech is XRP being used? I think you're going to say in which piece of technology that Ripple works with is XRP being used. ODL, they are using XRP in that. And then sending payments, CBDCs is really where XRP is going to shine. So once there are issued assets on the XRPL between side networks or private ledgers that connect to the mainnet, at that point they will use XRP to transact between two nation states or sovereign currencies or institutions that issue stable coins, and that'll be the bridge between the two parties that they can trust. They don't have to basically hold the other person's currency. They can just send a transaction and know that it's going to get there almost instant for very low cost, and there's no counterparty risk in the transaction. So those would be the circumstances in which XRP would be used. Anytime you need instant settlement. Excited to see stable coins and CBDCs issued on the XRPL. We do need hooks, need smart contracts inherent to the mainnet in order to be able to see CBDCs live. I think that's why we've seen maybe a pivot from Ripple here in the short term or in the last few days. Obviously, they were never really in opposition to hooks. I don't know why people felt that way. There's a progression of how things should work, right? They launched it on a site to make sure that it was going to be viable and it was going to work and it wasn't going to cause problems if they launched it on the mainnet. And they've let that run for almost a year now. And it hasn't been an issue, right? And so now they've trialed it. They've let it go over there. They've seen how it's going to work. And I think now they feel comfortable with that technology potentially moving over to the mainnet. And so they still have to propose an amendment for that. We've got to get through the amendments that currently exist that we just talked about. But, there are some other parties that utilize the XRPL to settle transactions and would use XRP if there was enough liquidity in it to settle transactions between parties for their software, namely R3. And I think that's still a significant possibility in the short term if there were a need for it in the market. So, but yeah, there's a couple different circumstances in which Ripple would use XRP with the banks. This is a good question. Mr. X says, hey, Jake, can I roll my inherited IRA from iTrust to GWP? Yes, sir, you can. It's still going to be a couple weeks before we have that capability. We will be able to transfer those assets in kind, as long as there are assets that we can hold in institutional custody there at Anchorage. There was an RIA that's under fire by the SEC because they weren't holding digital assets or some other assets in qualified custody. And so we don't want to play with the fire. We want to make sure we are SEC registered and comply with all the regulations that are mandated there. And so because of that, we're going to work with Anchorage and some other custodians potentially to be able to provide institutional custody or qualified custody for all assets that we work with. And so right now, currently, we can do Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Matic, Chainlink, Solana, Quant. Trying to think if there's Avalanche, and then a lot of EVM stuff. So if you have Aave, Compound, Yield Farm, a lot of the DeFi that's been developed on top of Ethereum, we have the capability to custody a lot of that. And if we don't, Anchorage, it's low cost for them to integrate that. So pushing them on XDC, because similar to Quant, it was an EVM based token, and then they migrated to XRC20. XLM, they did custody at one point. So if we have enough demand for that, they can turn it back on, basically. And then us and another custodian have fairly significant amounts of HBAR, another wealth manager, not another custodian, that they've brought to Anchorage and have asked them to integrate that network. So hopefully those three in particular, XLM, XDC, and Hedera Hashgraph, will hopefully be live, and we'll be able to custody those assets one way or another here in Q4. But if your IRA holds XRP, Bitcoin or Ethereum, also happy to help you roll that over and earn yield on that inside that IRA, which is awesome. Avatar says, also, let's say XRP goes to $1,000, like all the founders will be gazillionaires, like a different kind of wealth. Like, this is my main concern about XRP. I don't see why that's a concern. If you took 12 years of your life to build a corporation and advance the technology that would completely change how value moved over the entire world, and you were incentivized to do so because you held a good portion of those tokens, I'm good for it. I want people that create significant value in this world to be compensated for their efforts. That is capitalism, right? And people can be upset by that. But I've met Brad, I've met Chris, I've met David. They're all good people. I might not agree with them on everything, but deep down, they're good people. And I don't think that they would use that. They would use that value to help. And they would also, that's the other thing about XRP, like, you will be incentivized to do so. The liquidity pools, the AMMs, the things that are being built out on the network, you will earn a pretty significant yield over the long term for providing liquidity to those markets and that infrastructure that's going to be built out. And that benefits everybody, right? Because now you have more liquidity, you have more access to capital, you have liquidity in private markets and other things that weren't necessarily as liquid before, real estate. You have faster, cheaper transactions at scale globally to move value for almost everything. So, if in general, I think that, and I could be wrong, this is just my guess, met with a lot of people, and they're nice enough to share their bag size and everything with us because we're working with them on the wealth management side. So I won't give specifics on anybody's holdings, but as an aggregate total, I think retail might hold maybe 1 to 2 billion XRP, probably on the lower side of that, probably closer to 1 billion out of 100 billion XRP. Okay. Jed sold all his off. So Jed no longer has any XRP. He's been sold out for a couple years now. Chris had some stolen just recently. Brad still has a good portion of his. And I don't think that they'll be allowed to keep, and they probably won't want to. I think they'll be incentivized to hand over a good chunk of that to certain parties globally if it is adopted at scale as a tier 1 asset. Again, I'm not overly concerned. I want everybody involved with this to make a boatload of money and then be incentivized to roll it back in and utilize the protocol and provide liquidity globally to help other people and do philanthropic stuff and all the other wonderful things that would come along with that. So I don't see the problem there, but there are other people that do, right? So it's a good point. Jeremy, thank you for the super chat, brother. He says, Jake, great content as always. Recently, Link2 allowed non-accredited investors to sign up and invest. One, are there any concerns non-accredited investors should be buying pre-IPO companies? So we do this also through the mastermind group that we have. And we do not market publicly these securities that we go out and find deals and orchestrate in there. You have to be in the group. So there's two pieces of that. So in order for somebody that is non-accredited to participate on an SPV, which is the way that Link2 does structure their investments, and they would use the 506B as a fund of funds to their 506C. So basically they would aggregate non-accredited investors on a separate vehicle, and then that vehicle would invest in the other fund that they have that owns the underlying equity. So there's two considerations. One, the investor has to be sophisticated. So what that means is they understand the risks associated with the investment. They've done their due diligence. They've been supplied with all of the information about the investment, where it could go wrong, what could be bad with it, and the upside, right? Everything in between. So they have a full understanding of the risks that they're taking. They're going to have to sign another document that allows the PPM that discloses all those things, that they recognize that those things exist. And then the other piece is you have to have a pre-existing business relationship. So some type of consideration is passed between you and the other party at some point, or you're on a mailing list or subscription list, or you have some affiliation with that party. I don't know how they're doing that. If you reached out to them, then that's enough for them to be able to allow people to invest on those. There's always risk with private investment. Nothing is a for sure thing. Do your due diligence. Make sure that you have assessed the risk associated with making an investment on their platform or any other platform if you're investing in pre-IPO shares or a company, and that you really do understand everything that's going on with it. And I would not invest any money that you cannot lose. That's kind of the point of the accreditation, right? So the whole point of an accredited investor is if they lose the money that they invested, they're not broke. They're not on the street tomorrow. So the two ways that people are normally accredited here in the US is that you have $1 million net worth outside of your primary residence. So it doesn't include the equity in your home. And then the other piece is, or the other way that you can obtain that status, if you're single, you're making at least $200,000 a year. If you're married, it's north of $300,000 a year between you and your spouse. And you have to do that for 2 years in a row in order to achieve that status. So if you're throwing in 5 or 10K on a deal, if you're making that type of money, or you had that $1 million in net worth outside your primary residence, you're probably going to be okay if you lose that 5 or 10K. Some people are not okay if they lose 5 or 10K. Some people's life savings is that 5 or 10K. If those people are investing, I'd be leery of that. Just don't invest more money than you can lose on stuff would be my recommendation there. Is that really the risk for non-accredited investors investing in pre-IPO shares. Singapore Flyer, they say, Mr. Jake, how's it going? To confirm to custody assets, you need two things, and you're correct. Assets need to be in an LLC or trust. Some type of entity does need to own the underlying assets to manage them. And then the second is they do need to be a value north of $100,000 currently today. And you could have two accounts, right? So it could be non-qualified funds or assets outside of an IRA or a retirement account. Like you mentioned here, 50K, just regular USD, and then 50K in an IRA. Yes, that would work. When you say custody, is that only crypto? Currently, we only work with digital assets. We are broadening the scope of that over the next 12 months here to traditional assets. We have a meeting with Black Diamond this week, which would do the reporting and aggregate full portfolio to be able to display to clients. Currently, we just have OnRamp, which is our partner, where our clients would onboard and they'd be able to see their full portfolio. So even if we held those assets across multiple custodians, if OnRamp was integrated with them, we'd be able to display, everything there in one UI or user interface for people under your account. But Black Diamond will be the long-term solution and reporting that we do provide our clients with, and that will provide an aggregate view of your private investments, your real estate, your stocks, your bonds, your treasuries, your commodities, whatever else you have aside from crypto. and on-ramp will continue to support just the crypto side and aggregate all of that. So to answer your questions here, all of them is yes. Short answers, yes. Let's see here. Very cool. Mario, he says, good evening from Argentina. Can I access institutional custody without having an LLC in the US? And also, what is the option to obtain returns and what percentage can be expected? Very good questions. You would need an entity that's filed there in your jurisdiction or another jurisdiction that would provide better tax incentives than Argentina. Just being honest, they have unrealized capital gains there in Argentina, which is not ideal. So ideally, you have an entity in some other, maybe the Caribbean or Bermuda, some other area down there that would hold the assets, and we could custody them once they were structured there in an LLC in one of those jurisdictions or trust in those jurisdictions. Happy to connect you with somebody that can help you orchestrate that if that's something you're interested in. And then the returns are on the lower end right now, very safe, very low risk, somewhere between 5 and 8% a year is ideally where we're shooting for clients, probably closer to 5 or 6, just being transparent. Once we have the capability to, and we do have this capability now, we can borrow against assets. We have a lot of other opportunities to be able to generate significantly higher returns and also generate cash flows and ways to depreciate assets that are being invested in against those cash flows to offset the taxable income here in the US and internationally. So starting off slow, making sure we have a viable model, making sure our partners and everything work. We've got tri-party agreements. There's sub-accounts that assets can be held in. Making sure that everything's structured and done the right way, compliance, everything's above board, setting a good standard, and then we'll continue to add ways to generate income and returns over time as things get set in stone. Being a little more methodical on managing capital than some of the other stuff that I do. I do kind of jump off the deep end on stuff sometimes, and I want to make sure that this is slow and steady for people. So hopefully that answers your question, and I appreciate it. Let's see here. David Baker says, what a day of news. Tomorrow and Friday should be wild. I'm hoping that the end of this week is exciting for people. I think it's going to be. I could be wrong, but we'll see. Feeling like things could get volatile. Like I said, volatile doesn't necessarily mean bad. It could mean very good for some people. David J. He says, Jake, my friend. Hey, brother. Will you please give insights onto where you think XLM fits in over the next few weeks as XRP rises to save the economy? Thank you. Hyperledger is huge. Almost every financial institution and merchant service provider that we've talked to deals with Hyperledger, BOSU, in some capacity. Again, you have to have enough liquidity in the asset to be able to settle transactions at scale. You need issued assets on the network. You need stable coins on the network. You need maybe CBDCs on the network. The more issued assets that end up on these networks and the more that they're actually being transacted with, the higher the value of these tokens will go. So I think Hyperledger sees greater adoption beyond this year. I could be wrong about that. It could go just right along with XRP like it always has. The reason that I think XRP may decouple from everything else would be an ETF launched by BlackRock. So last year in November, almost a year ago now, golly, there was a fake ETF that was, iShares XRP Trust that was put out by BlackRock, and somebody found the Delaware listing and posted it. XRP went up, and they immediately came out. Well, Bloomberg came out, not BlackRock and not Ripple, and said it was fake. They said that the DOJ was investigating, and they swept that under the rug. And in that moment, XRP broke away from everything. There was no movement on XLM. There was no movement on Bitcoin. The rest of the market was completely decoupled. So I think there could be an instance where we see an ETF launched by BlackRock, or they use that same infrastructure again for XRP. And there she goes. We'll see if that happens or not. I think that'd be a great way to move liquidity into XRP very quickly if you needed to. XLM, I don't know if it goes along for that ride or not, but it definitely will be used long-term. Hyperledger is very significant. It's interoperable with Corda and the EVM via the Cactus protocol. Merchant services like Stronghold and Velo, I think, are going to be very large. I think that those, like I said before on the Monday Live, I think that those will probably get acquired at some point in the future by larger firms that just want to pull that stuff in. Maybe Stripe buys Stronghold, you know. And I think that's going to happen with a lot of these early movers. You're going to see acquisitions galore on the other side of regulations, just because the established players have the capital. And if you fight the incumbents, this is what happens. Amazon comes to you first and they say, hey, we want to cut you a fat check and we're going to buy this. And if the founder says, absolutely not, I'm not selling out, within 2 years, they will take your market share. They have the capital, they have the resources, they have the marketing, they have everything they need to take whatever you built away from you. So strategic acquisitions oftentimes are ideal. Now, other side of that coin, Netflix went to Blockbuster and tried to sell it to them for $50 million. And Blockbuster was like, we're not buying that. This is garbage. Nobody's going to do this. And now Blockbuster has one store, the original one. And Netflix runs 15% of global internet volume on a daily basis. Missed the boat on that one, Blockbuster. Financial institutions are a bit different. You know, tech players are a bit different. So anyway, I'm rambling on here. I think XLM fits long term. I don't know what it does here in the next few weeks. Let's see here. Alberta Wolf says, hey, Jake, how are you? Can you update us on where we stand with the domino theory? Same place we have been, unfortunately. Still just waiting. So really waiting on one of three things can happen. Japan can increase interest rates. Cool. Off we go. Because that'll unwind the reverse carry trade, and that has knock-on effects to dump U.S. treasuries onto the market. BRICS would then, come in alongside of that, dump their treasuries. U.S. has to spin up stablecoin regulation, push it through Congress very quickly in order to soak up those treasuries coming onto the market. That also basically cripples Tether. Now the liquidity in the crypto markets is frozen, basically. Now the exchanges have to pump XRP in order to be able to provide liquidity in their ecosystems to continue trading and settling at scale. There's also implications for Bitcoin if Tether goes down, and the liquidity in the crypto markets is crippled for a period of time. You would see a huge sell-off in Bitcoin now that the large financial institutions have significant positions in Bitcoin through the spot ETF. Now they have huge unrealized losses. They've got to sell off positions in traditional stocks in order to cover those losses. And you would see a huge drawback in traditional markets, along with people unwinding their trades and positions to be able to repay their loans in yen for the reverse carry trade. So you would need instant settlement on the back end of the stock market. You would need liquidity in XRP to be able to handle that. I don't know that I have the order of how those dominoes fall exactly right, or the reasons, but I'm close. I'll tell you that. So anyway, that's where we're at. We're waiting on oil to go up because of conflict in the Middle East, the Fed to pivot on interest rates here in the U.S., or Japan to increase interest rates there or by the BOJ. And I think any one of those could transpire over the next 30 days here. Anticipation is that the Fed is going to lower interest rates at the next Fed meeting on September 18th. Is that priced into the market? Maybe. That is the anticipation. So we would need something a bit more significant to get the Russell's breath to open up. And that's why I think they're going to save markets over treasuries this time, because they know they have their ace in the pocket in order to drive demand for treasuries with stablecoin regs. So we'll see. But that's my 2 cents, and I appreciate you asking. Carl says I've been broke a few times. Me too, brother. Lots of times. If you take big risk, if you take big swings, you'll connect every once in a while. I would say that's the other thing. If you get rich, you should only have to get rich once. I've said that before. Kevin, what's Kevin's last name? It's another YouTuber. Really, really good on the TA. I can't think. I'm drawing a blank tonight. Anyway, he shared that post that I made a little while back, probably maybe a couple years ago now. But you should only have to get rich once, and then if you play your cards right and you handle it right, you should be good for the rest of your life. Don't gamble at all. Don't roll it all again. I have seen that done, and it did not end up well for an Ethereum whale that gambled it all on Luna. Just if you make it fast, you lose it fast, is all I would say. And so that's some of the benefit I would say here for XRP holders in particular. This has not been fast. It has not been easy. You have gained some of the skills, traits, and beliefs that you need to be successful on the other side of this. And I think some of that may have been on purpose. So, let's see here. Burnsy says, what does BTC or ETH need to do for you to consider it as a short or long-term investment? We have a lot of clients. I know a lot of great people that hold Bitcoin and are huge believers in Bitcoin. I got to talk with Caitlin Long, her bank at Custodia. They're very pro-Bitcoin. A lot of the people at Rare Evo in Vegas were pro-Bitcoin. If it migrated to useful proof of work, I think that there's a chance that it could continue to stand the test of time and continue to grow in value. But I think that's the way it needs to go. So useful proof of work would be like incentivizing people to refit the hydroelectric dams in the U.S. With Bitcoin mining, and then pulling that power that would be generated by the hydroelectric dams onto the grid to be able to supply people with excess power, and the excess power that they couldn't use could go to run the Bitcoin mining rigs and continue to run and grow that network. I think that that's a good way to do it. Ethereum, in my opinion, is a security. Not to say that's bullish or bearish. I think proof of stake probably does exist long term. I think that there's other protocols. I think that it'll just be deemed a security. And the way that you'll have to participate in those liquidity pools or the staking pools is those will have to be investment vehicles. They'll have to be sold as securities offerings. They'll have to be an SPV or some other regulated fund that has the SEC oversight on it. Because you're putting up consideration, you're giving that consideration to somebody else for their efforts to produce profit for you. Delegated proof of stake, I think, might be able to skirt that, but pure proof of stake like Ethereum, I do think ends up, and Prometheum's already stated that they believe Ethereum's a security, and the SEC gave them the only designation to hold digital asset securities of any custodian. So that's kind of like the SEC speaking out of both sides of their mouth. They're saying it's not a security in the Hinman speech, but now they're saying it is a security. And I think they kind of could do that because it did migrate from proof of work to proof of stake. I think that's maybe what they say and do. Returns on both of those. So Archax has some bonds that they have for both Ethereum and BTC that are pretty lucrative. So if you already had large positions, and if you have, I will say this too, people that have larger amounts of capital already and are looking for quote unquote blue chip positions, I think that those could be great investments for those people. I know people that have taken allocations there because they feel like they're the leaders in the space and that they're not going to go anywhere. I don't know that's true. I think we're still early to the space. I still think there's a lot of things to play out here. We've never seen Bitcoin perform or do anything when it wasn't number one, when it didn't have the most liquidity. I'm extremely confident that XRP will surpass Bitcoin as the largest market cap in digital assets. And I will say that that's fine. If I'm wrong, I will come out and say it, but that's my bias. And when that happens, I don't know what those people do, right? I don't know if they capitulate and swap. I don't know if they continue to hold because there's so much maximalism isn't the right word, but tribalism around that token. And a lot of the like freedom narrative that's around it. For me to consider it a good short or long-term investment, I think a small allocation to both definitely isn't going to hurt people. We have clients that have, for them, small allocations, and that's their exposure to the space. But if you wanted to take just a safe bet and you didn't know which one was going to be successful long-term, you might just do like 1% of your net worth in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP and let it ride. Those were the top three tokens for a long time. And I do think, one, if not all of those, will be extremely successful. Let's see here. Luke says, I don't have a business. I work a 9-to-5 job. Fantastic. And overall, hypothetically packed into XRP. If I have 100K XRP, what would be the best next step if you were in my shoes? If you are single, I would set up an LLC. I would set up a holding company that held those assets, especially if you plan to take some profits here in the short term. If we saw price appreciation, let's go ahead and get it in there. That way you're good. If you're married, you might be able to hold off especially if you're not going to take profit. If you just plan to hold them long term, when you do the capital contribution to the business, you're still going to transfer your basis, irrespective of when you do it now or later. You're still going to need an LLC outside of your trust that you set up long term, ideally, so that it can pay the taxes on the trust's behalf, because it's going to get preferential treatment on the taxes that flow to it versus being taxed inside the trust on gains there. So, hypothetically, if you had that large of an allocation, an LLC would make a lot of sense, and it would give you the most flexibility on the other side of price appreciation to make sure that you're protected and to be able to take profits and generate income with the asset. And then again, you could work with us in institutional custody, and we can help you earn yield on it and do all of the lending and borrowing against it, all the other cool stuff that I talk about. It says my video is choppy. Interesting. I'm on fiber, so it's my spectrum. So I apologize if it is choppy. Let's see here. Scrolling on down. Alfredo. Hola. What's going on, man? He says 2 questions. NFA, what's your price prediction of HBAR? So not financial advice. Also, who's your favorite all-time bodybuilder? Mine's Dorian. Good. I like this question. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Very cool, man. 80s and 90s were it. Like, if I could go back to an era in bodybuilding, Lee Haney, Dorian, like, that's it, man. Favorite bodybuilder of all. I'll answer that one first, and then price prediction on HBAR. Favorite bodybuilder of all time. Man. Probably Lee Haney. Be super cliche to say Arnold, right? mean, Danny Padilla or Tom Platz, both of those guys, like, fantastic physiques, a little shorter, a little bulkier. Dennis Wolf is another favorite of mine. He's huge. Well, he's not huge anymore. He's a little bit older now, but he was, 6 foot. Guys that are 6 foot and big, like, I know how hard that is to grow and be that size and deal with how large you are. So just have a lot of appreciation for him. Super tiny waist, huge lats. It's like, I'm sure other people are like, oh, this is weird, just talking about dudes. It's like an art form, right? Like, and especially if you're competitive at it, like, you have aspirations and you learn a lot about it. So I would probably say Lee Haney. Like, if I had to pick a bodybuilder that I had in mind that had the best proportions of any Mr. Olympia, I like somebody that's around the 230, 240 range. Dorian brought in a whole new level of mass that, like, just never been seen before, and he was peeled. So anyway, yeah, that's my answer there, is probably Lee Haney. And then price prediction on HBAR. That's my number 2, to be honest with you. If I had, like, if you held me down and said you can only pick 2, I would say XRP and HBAR. Hedera Hashgraph is a sleeping giant that people just don't realize. ICP, I think, has some, Max is going to say insane clown posse, but Internet Computer, I think, has some significant upside long term. We saw them, printing same thing as XRP for the derivatives markets. I don't think it'll be used as collateral in the derivatives markets like XRP will, but price prediction for HBAR. So what's interesting about HBAR is the fees are fixed on that network. They're dollar denominated and they never change. So even with the price appreciation of the token, you're not going to see fees go up on the network, which is huge. And then Mance and Swirled Labs are here in Dallas with me, right? So again, biases, so just take it with a grain of salt. Really just depends on the adoption of the network at scale. I think, $10 is probably reasonable if you did see significant adoption of the network, which I do think you will. I mean, the people that are on the council, like, you got Dell, you got Google, you got IBM, you got Boeing, you got SoftBank. Like, there's some big players, and there's some more big players that are coming to the council, according to their business development officer that we met at Consensus. I think Web3, dApps, and security specifically, like things that really need to be secure, like digital identity, sharing your credentials and stuff, financial information, medical records, all that stuff. I think it's highly likely that it ends up on Hedera. North of $10. If you pinned me to the ground and said, like, what do you think? Not financial advice, like you said. That's just my best guess. We'll see where it ends up going. He says Franco. Franco's good. Yeah, he's in two Mr. Olympias. I really don't think he should have gotten the Olympias that he won. Again, some of those other people that I mentioned, I think should have won those. But just my 2 cents. Randy, what's going on, brother? He says, hi, Jake. If we're earning yield on the migrated IRA, where will the yield dollars be held? And is there any manner in which it can be utilized before age 59 and a half? Thanks, buddy. Yes. And that's the secret sauce of some of the stuff that we're doing. So, if you're older, an IRA really makes a lot of sense. And when I say older, I don't mean it in a derogatory way. I just mean closer to retirement. Okay. So if you're in your 50s, awesome. IRA, awesome. Roth IRA, awesome. If you're in your 30s like me, long way away from that, right? So how do you, if I do have some assets there, how do I get a benefit from that before I'm 59 and a half, which is a great question. If we're able to generate that yield, it'll go into a side account that can remain invested the same way. But profits or yield that's generated off the assets in the IRA are not the original consideration. And as long as they're segregated on the accounting, we can eventually grow that account large enough where you can borrow against it, cash value. So that's the plan with those, is to be able to generate yield, through the manner that we're doing, in cash or in kind, and then, keep those assets deployed, also generating yield, compounding on themselves through one manner or another, and allow you to be able to borrow against that side pocket or that side account that is the yield off of the IRA. So thank you for the super chat, by the way. And I'm super stoked on the IRA stuff. When we originally had the conversation with Anchorage, and our account manager there was like gangbusters to do that, I was like, finally somebody, because there's just nobody that transfers in kind. So that's been a huge question in the last couple of days from people is, do I have to cash it out and then take the fees and pay the taxes and then migrate it to y'all? No, we can move it in kind, a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, a backdoor IRA, IRA, LLC, or trust. We can do them all. And we transfer the assets in kind into those policies that we will be managing and be able to generate yield on those assets, which are the two big things that I wanted to accomplish that I haven't seen anybody else on the market being able to do. So pumped for that. Luke says, only two scenarios can play out. One, XRP saves everything in the financial system and the global markets. Two, it goes to zero because of a nuclear winter due to the current administration. I'm going to say one. I really don't see any chance of number two happening at this point. But hey, if it does, we won't be here to worry about it anyway, right? So let's see here. DFIN, EVM coming already. Q1, Q2, and the mainnet smart contracts will be a light version, not full smart contracts, most likely, and hooks might be the way to do it. I'm extremely confident that hooks is the way to do it on the mainnet. I think the EVM will continue to be a side chain. I think that'll be interoperable through Axelar with the mainnet. The light smart contracts, I think, allows for all of the benefits that the XRPL has. And it also makes it where they don't have to continue to pass like all of these amendments and have votes on them every time. People can just spin up kind of their own little environment or trials or tests on things. And if they're successful, people will adopt it. If it's not, then it, goes on its merry way. So yeah, if you guys haven't seen the interview with Vet, I would encourage you to go check that out. Super brilliant guy. Showed his face on there, which I didn't anticipate happening. Super cool of him to do that. He runs a validator on the XRPL, and him and I went back and forth on a lot of things about smart contracts coming to the mainnet in that podcast. So, which just great timing on that, by the way. I had no idea that was going to be how that played out, but it was worked out really well. Scrolling on down here, I missed some super chats, so we're going to catch those. Randy says, perfect world. Where do you see DAG, DWP in 5 years? A dream out loud for us. Man, Randy. Well, I'll just tell you. We're alive here. I'll just be real with you guys. So I believe in manifestation. There's been times in my life that I have thought things and visualized them, and then they've magically happened for me. I think and I didn't know how they were going to happen. That's the other crazy part to me, is I'm like, okay, this is what I want to happen. This is what I think about. These are the opportunities I'm going to look for. And I'm actively working toward them. And then they end up showing up. One of those was flying on a private jet. 3 months before that, decided I wanted to fly on a private jet. And sure enough, within 3 months, that opportunity presented itself and it happened. I haven't flown since, but I definitely want to do it again. And if everything pops off, I'm for sure. That's the way that we're traveling. And then when I was younger, I had a sales job, and I was doing pretty well. But there were other people that I knew that drove company trucks and had company cards, and like the company that I worked for was voted the cheapest Fortune 500 company in the Fortune 500, and the CEO was proud of that. I don't like that at all. That means you're not taking care of your people, right? And they weren't. They knew it. So I was like, I don't want to travel. I don't want to be away from home. I don't want to be away from my wife and child. But I want a company truck. I want a company card. I want more money. And within 4 months, I had a job offer, and it came from a vendor that I always do my best to do more than people ask me for. Sometimes I don't always get that, but I do my best on it. And he saw that and offered me the position, and it worked out. Not long term, but short term. So anyway, all that to say, 4 years ago, I wrote down that we would have a company that managed $10 trillion, larger than BlackRock, and I would sit on the board of the top 10 most progressive companies in the world. And at the time, I had no idea how I would accomplish that or how I would do it. I started just making videos, on Facebook at the time. Talked about that on the Live Monday. And now, like, that actually looks like that is possible. So 5 years from now, that's where I see us. I'll be closer to 40. That's kind of my vision by that age for me. And want to be managing $10 trillion, be similar size to like a private BlackRock, and be able to really give people what they need. There's a ton of people that take advantage of people and scrape fees and don't perform. I don't want any of that. I'm participating in a liquidity event with you guys. Obviously, we need to make money. There needs to be enterprise value and all those things. But everything that I've done is set up in a way where we actually have to do what we say in order to be able to generate returns for people and be compensated well for doing that. There's no way for us to just rake fees. We barely cover costs if we're at scale and with the cost structure that I've set up for all of our clients. So it's enough to like scrape by and make it, or we crush it, we knock it out of the park. We're generating, close to 20% returns or north of 20% returns for people on an annual basis, and we're doing really well. The family office, right, that side of things, I've built out a full scope of services there and found all the people that I believe, have best interest for clients at heart. We're going to make sure of that. That's kind of the position that we sit in. And so we want to be able to provide the best service providers in the industry that have the knowledge and expertise for digital assets and are also going to take care of our clients. So definitely want to continue to develop on that side, continue to, scale things out and bring things in-house so that there isn't outside risk. The accounting, CPAs, we've got the wealth management. We have trustee services in-house now, which is super awesome. So we'll continue to build out the scope of services on that side. And then we've got some other ventures that we've built over the past year. And we'll continue to do that. So continue to scale up other companies in the space, make strategic investments in companies in the space that are the market leader or the standard for whatever they're doing, that provide additional benefit for our clients as well. So anyway, I don't know if that was the answer that you thought you were going to get for this, but I appreciate you asking it, and like happy to be transparent with you guys. So excited for the jet, excited for all the wonderful things, excited for all the blessings that are coming to us. But at the end of the day, really just want to make sure people have a good solution where they're going to get taken care of and their needs and benefits going to be put first over. You're not going to get that at Fidelity or Schwab or Goldman, all these investment banks that will likely hold crypto and provide a lot of the benefits that we're going to. I've worked with them. They are in it for the money. I can tell you our team, we want to do well. We definitely want to be well compensated. For me, I always try to make sure other people have to win in order for us to win and try to align incentives like that. And so that's what we will continue to do and the vision for the long term. So great question. Thank you for the super chat. There was one more up here that I missed that I'm going to... Oh, it was Randy again. Okay. Great questions. Let's see here. Eric says, how do you see the price increase or a need for the HBAR token? I get XRP's reason for a higher price, but the HBAR, I see tech being good, but can you use the tech without the token? No, you still have to pay the fees in the token on the network, but the fees are fixed. So XRP, the fees are low, right? It's 0.0000012 XRP per transaction. Right. So at scale, they'll probably still have to reduce the fee a little bit and they'll vote to do that. But it's not a fixed dollar denomination. It's paid in XRP. And actually they pushed another amendment not too long ago for XRP fees on the network. So that'll continue to be the case over here, whereas HBAR is a fixed fee that's dollar denominated. But the fees on the network will still have to be paid in HBAR. So as the network scales and transactions move, HBAR will continue to appreciate. For those reasons. Let's see here. Katie girl, how are you, ma'am? She says, my question disappeared, so I'm sending it again. Do you think job reports on Friday could cause price action, or you think we'll have to wait for the 18th still? I anticipate the Fed coming out before the Fed meeting and pivoting. If you're watching, I could be wrong. We could wait till the 18th. I think they're under pressure. I think that markets we've seen a huge downturn in NVIDIA and other positions. The current administration, in order to save face, wants markets to be in a good position at the time of the election. Otherwise, they have no chance, right? And so I think there's going to be a pivot one way or the other. We may have to wait till the 18th. It could come before that. Jobs reports, if they are way worse than expected, middle of next week before the 18th, I think you could see a pivot at that point. Could be this week. We'll see. If you're looking at the charts, I follow Blockchain Backer. He looks at all this stuff. I like that he looks at macro. I like that he looks at breadth of other markets and what things have to happen in order for crypto to succeed. He thinks there's going to be some event that comes out of nowhere that causes price appreciation and breadth to open up. I would agree with him. I think the Fed's going to come out and pivot. I think they're going to choose to save markets. I think it's going to unwind the reverse carry trade. I think it would dampen the effect on the U.S. economy at scale and the markets if they pivoted, because there's going to be demand that flows into the markets at that point, and there's going to be a ton of people that are unwinding those trades. So it kind of comes to a medium, and there's enough demand that it soaks up some of the supply that's coming onto the market. That's just my 2 cents, but I anticipate something personally, but before the 18th. But I could be wrong. Frank, he says, is it possible we can get someone on the show from Australia? Yeah, we can. We can get John Basilos. Also, wanted to recommend doing in the short term for someone that has less than 50,000 XRP. Sit on your hands, bro. I know that's probably not what you wanted to hear. I could be wrong again. I don't have a crystal ball. My anticipation is XRP makes a little pit stop somewhere between 50 and 100 before we see 4 digits. Maybe it's not very long. Maybe it doesn't give you much time to get your assets moved over. Maybe it goes straight to 500. Shane Ellis, right? If you have less than 50,000 XRP in Australia, I would recommend getting it into something, potentially a family trust or offshore. I know it's expensive. You're going to have to pay taxes on the transfer in. But once you're in there, it can grow, and you're going to be able to mitigate some of the taxes that you're going to have to deal with. If it's in an international trend, I got with a buddy today. So many Aussies. You guys are great, by the way. We have a bunch of Aussies in the mastermind. We have a channel for Australia in the mastermind. This gentleman, I talk to him frequently on X. Great guy. He connected me with his buddy that does relocations for Aussies to Dubai. And he connected me with an estate planner there in Dubai that'll help set up trusts for people. I have another gentleman that's in the mastermind group that worked with an estate planner to set up his assets in the British Virgin Islands, BVI. So that would be my recommendation, is get offshore with some of that. If you plan on going to Singapore or whatever, another jurisdiction where you plan on living, look for a friendly one on the tax side, get your stuff set up there. They hit you hard on taxes there in Australia. And if you do plan on selling, you're going to eat it. You're going to take it in the shorts. So I would get something set up beforehand. Even if it is domestic, you can get with John Basilos. You can, reach out to us via either one of our websites. So digitalfamilyoffice.io or digitalwealthpartners.net, and just ask for somebody there in Australia that you can speak with, and we'll get you John's information to be able to set up a time. If you were here in the U.S., I would just say sit on your hands, because you get 13.6 million that you can gift over your lifetime with no tax implications. So if you're here in the U.S. and you have less than 50K, if at $100 you got 5 mil, awesome. You're still not over the gift tax though. And you can set up everything afterwards, right? If you've got, or you can put it in an LLC, make sure you can take profit, and you're positioned. You can do life insurance. You can do a bunch of other stuff. But they're in the UK and in Australia, they make it very difficult to mitigate taxes and not pay the crown. So anyway, happy to get you those resources if you're interested. Maine says, what percentage of your IRA account held through you can you take up a loan for real estate investments? So in an IRA, you can hold any asset, right? So you can hold real estate in an IRA, a self-directed IRA, and we could do that. Or again, we can't borrow against those assets specifically. If we earn yield using those assets, that money can be put into a side account, and then we can borrow against that. But we can't borrow against the assets that were originally pledged in the IRA. So when you ask what percentage of your IRA account can be held through you, can you take loans for the answer is 0. We can't borrow against those assets. We can only borrow against the returns we generate on those assets in the side account, and it's going to take a little bit of time before that's large enough position that it's going to be meaningful to be able to borrow against. And when we can, I would say, depending on how those assets are invested, the LTV on them is going to range wildly. Low end, maybe 30% LTV, high end, depending on what we have, 75, 80% LTV. So maybe more than that if it's XRP, I'm hoping. If it's a tier 1 asset, I think we'll be doing all right. But if it doesn't get that designation, then it'll probably be closer to the LTVs I just mentioned. Atlantic Living says, appreciate you being here, as always. Can you speak on anything in particular that you don't agree with Chris, Brad, and David? Thank you. David in particular has some very liberal views that I don't necessarily agree with, that he speaks about on Twitter and stirs the pot with. Chris and Brad haven't really been very public facing over the past 4 or 5 years. Well, 3 years in particular, just with the lawsuit. They've voiced their opinion against the SEC, but they really haven't given us much of their personal stuff. And they haven't really voiced their opinion on anything aside from regulation on digital assets. They've said that they don't believe Ethereum is a security. I believe that Ethereum is a security. So that would be one thing I disagree with Brad and Chris on. And then, like I said, David's just put some stuff out there. And that's okay. I have a lot of respect for all these guys. I don't have to agree with them on everything. There's lots of people that I don't even like as a person that I have tremendous respect for in business and other things that they've done. I'm weird, I guess, in that I can kind of separate those things. I also don't have to like you to work with you. It's better that if I do, but especially as like a contractor or somebody that I do business with, you could be a butthole. But if you do a really good job at whatever you do and you're one of the best in the world at it and you deliver every time, cool. I don't have to have much conversation with you. I just call you when I need what you do. We do business together and that's it. I don't have to go have a beer or hang out with you. So anyway, I am probably a little bit odd that I separate emotional like stuff from business. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. I can have a conversation with an employee, and I have kind candor when I'm having conversations with people. I do my best to smooth the situation if I have to let somebody go or have a conversation that is difficult. Often compliment them, and if they're not performing in a certain position, I'm like, hey, I'm not going to cut it here. What we hired you for, you're not doing. You're not performing in the manner that we need you to. If you need a recommendation somewhere else and it's for this type of job that you are good at, because I really like you as a person, I think that you would be really good in this position. If you apply for that, I'll put me down as a recommendation. I will say yes and get you the job, So anyway, that type of kind candor I have when dealing with people. But rambling here, it's late. Where are we? On time. We've been on for about an hour and 13, so we'll hang out for another 15 minutes here. But those would be some of the things I don't agree with Chris and Brad on. Would be that Ethereum is not a security. I think it is. And then David's political views, I don't agree with some of his stuff there. Garlinghouse will pass Elon as the richest man in the world with his personality and communication skills. I can see him being president of the United States someday. I don't think Brad has aspirations for that. I could be wrong. He definitely fits the bill as somebody that could be on the political side of things. He's pretty private though. Chris is private. I think that they'll probably, and they're not spring chickens anymore either. Both those guys are close to retirement. They were around for the internet boom. Brad worked at AOL and Yahoo and did a really good job there. Drove Uber for a while and then got over here at Ripple. So, Garlinghouse would be a trillionaire. He'd be doing pretty good on the other side of price appreciation for XRP. And like you said, I think that that's deserved. After dealing with the lawsuit, going through everything that they have, after building this out over more than a decade, after creating, basically pushing the network to where it really is decentralized and building the governance into it, where there's enough validators, getting the adoption from the institutions and governments and banks and enterprises. Man, kudos. I'm sure that there were lots of times where he wasn't sure if it was going to work out. Anybody that's been super successful has been in that position and probably dealt with that the majority of the time before it did work out. I think at this point, it's pretty solidified that it's going to work out. And like I said, kudos to them. I wish them all the best and appreciate everything that they've done. So, Lucas, hey, your last name is associated with a community that I like. Love your content. Appreciate you and the mastermind. Awesome. You mentioned safe yield from Anchorage Partnership. Can you speak to the type of scenarios presented, risk even on the low end, trying to obey rule number 1? Rule number 1, don't lose XRP. Rule number 2, refer to rule number 1. That's our rules. So we do covered calls and puts. We use Hashnote or another partner, Swap Global. We have a tri-party agreement. We move the assets into a sub-account. They still stay in qualified custody. All parties have visibility of the assets. They're locked and escrowed. Everybody is a signer on the account. They cannot be removed without your approval. The covered calls and puts are taken on both sides of all the trades. And so the options are cheap enough that it pays out either way. So if the market goes down, you make money. You're able to pay off, the positions that didn't make money. If the market goes up, you make money. You're able to pay off the positions that didn't make money. And so it's kind of a slow and steady churn. You're taking both sides of the trade, and there's enough margin that it grows just a little bit over time, irrespective of market condition. Now we can be a little riskier and put more on one side than the other. But yeah, that's how we do it. I'm happy to have Matt come on here. He's our CIO and kind of give you guys a little bit greater explanation around those things as things progress. We will go over it with all of our clients on how we're doing it. And as far as I'm aware, we're the only asset manager or wealth manager that's doing it. There's some funds that do that, but nobody else is doing it in the wealth management space. So hopefully that answers your question. And I appreciate you asking it and talking about rule number 1. Let's see here. Mighty Tones asked a good question. So what happens if you own a crypto like SHX or Velo as opposed to owning stock when it's bought out? Nothing. Your stock would, like if you got bought out by a company, you own the stock, then your stock would convert to that other company's. There would be a ratio, whatever it was for the conversion rate. If it's a publicly traded company, now you would have shares listed on a public stock exchange that you would have liquidity for. With the digital asset, they would still use it, right? They're buying that technology, they're buying that infrastructure. So maybe they all have an offer to buy it back from you. I don't know. That's probably like a scenario. I don't know if that's good or bad. But yeah, the asset itself it sits on a network. It's a protocol. It moves value inside those ecosystems, and best worst case look at it, I think they would offer to buy it back from you. Let's see here. Ronnie, he says, I really enjoy, appreciate your Q&As. Thank you, brother. Thank you for being here. I'm a Brit living in Spain. It's early morning there for you, man. Thank you for being up so early and listening to this. I'm looking forward to earning yield on my XRP when insured options are available somewhere accessible to me. We can work with you, bro. Happy to have that conversation. The assets do have to be held in an entity. If you're in Spain, I would look at Portugal. We do have a service over there that can help you establish an entity. We've got a couple different estate planners that can help you establish an entity there in Spain. You might look at Nevis also, which isn't too far from you. So Portugal or Nevis, if you're in Spain, good options. Nevis LLC is great. And once your assets are in there, then we can work with you, no problem. Be able to generate yield on the assets. Waiting on Archax to iron some stuff out. If they do that, then we'll also coordinate with them, and that's a little bit closer to you. They are located in the UK, so but we can work with international players, and happy to do so if that's something you're interested in. Kenny G, he says, do we see utility before 2025? I will answer that this way. Yoshitaka Kitao, who is, I don't know if he's the president or director or CEO, he's one of those positions for SBI. says that all of the banks, these are his words, not mine, all banks in Japan will utilize XRP before, keyword, before 2025. So tell him, I think so. If he's right, then yes. Here we go. Bugsy says, Jake, do you see a price appreciation of 2 digits or more on XRP by the end of the year? Thanks. It depends on utility, right? So if Yoshitaka Katao is right, if we see adoption for settlement in the back end of the stock market or FX or Swift, absolutely. Probably 3 digits before the end of the year. If we don't, then no. Retail speculation is not going to drive it any higher than it has in the past. We need real world utility and adoption at scale from institutions and liquidity to pour in from institutions using XRP, not necessarily buying, but using XRP to settle transactions. So I think so. We'll see. Kevin Cage, thank you, Angus. Yes, Kevin was the one that shared my tweet. Really like Kevin. Great TA. He's the one that got, like, in 2020, I found Kevin, and he called out Quant before it popped off. Made a bunch of money on that. Kudos to Kevin there. Casper was another one. Talked about VeChain. Made some good money on VeChain. Zillow. There was a bunch of coins in 2020. Cardano. Like, he talked about all this stuff when he was, like, reading technical analysis, and he was like, I'm taking a position here. You do you. And then HBAR was another one that he was early on. Kevin's great on the TA. And yeah, like I said, he was great to share my tweet, and I appreciate him for doing so. I'm going to scroll on down here to the bottom, make sure I get all the super chats. Honest Aim says, go White Rock. Thanks for all you do for us. Absolutely, brother. Yeah, I don't know. I just want to make sure people, like I said, are taken care of and have an option that's not somebody that's looking to take advantage of them on the other side of this. So that's what we're building. That's my vision for it. Let's see. Ray says, how do you feel about Bernie Madoff? I think Bernie was a very intelligent man. I think he had very ill intent for people, and was very charismatic and sold people on a bunch of stuff that did not have their best interests at heart. You know, and look, you don't have to believe me. I'm not here. Obviously, I want to get the word out. I'm very public facing. I want to help people, but in the same breath, like, honestly, at the end of the day, I just want people thinking about the stuff that I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be me or my group. If you go out and find proficient professionals before price appreciation and get your stuff set up, or know what you're going to do post price appreciation to make sure you and your family are taken care of, you really don't need me. Like, I've put out enough content that you can do it all yourself. It is going to be hard to find CPAs and other people. On the other side of price appreciation, it probably won't be. The deal on that is, I've seen this for other clients. People don't always have your best interest at heart, and people get taken advantage of. I have a business partner, close business partner. His CPA and his business partners took him for hundreds of thousands of dollars and left him high and dry. I don't want that for people. I don't want them to end up in a spot where they just don't know, and they take it for granted that somebody is there to help them, and they end up getting taken advantage of. So I know that I'm building a team, and I'm not managing the money. Also, like, I'm an owner at DWP. It's a subsidiary of Digital Ascension Group. I'm not a financial advisor. We employ financial advisors that have their Series 65, have all the compliance, like, doing everything right over there. I am not managing the money. I sit on the other side of the table from our advisors and make sure that the client's interests are taken care of. So I'm not compensated on any specific financial products that are sold. Obviously, there's incentive, if on the equity side, if the firm does well. But at the end of the day, I want the clients to be taken care of, and I'm interested in long-term relationships with people. There's a lot of people that are quick nickel, quick buck. If that was me, we would have shilled the mastermind or a token and then been gone, a long time ago. I will say that I'm proud that we've been consistent, that we've been here, that we will continue to grow, we will continue to be here. And it's been really cool to see, I knew that from bodybuilding and other things that I've done, but just to see people reach out, the longer that I've been doing this, people were like, hey, I've been watching you for the past 2 years or longer, and you've been consistent. And so now I felt like it was the right time to reach out. You don't get that if you're a flash in the pan, right? And it continues to compound. So anyway, good question here. I think that there are a lot of shysters out there. There's a lot of scam artists. There's a lot of long-term rug pulls. You can look up Digital Wealth Partners. We are an SEC registered firm. I can't do that and scam people. There's so much compliance and regulation and red tape and stuff that we've had to go through to make sure this is legitimate and done the right way. And we're early on. We're going to get audited. We're going to get run over the coals. That's going to happen. And so I've done my best to find the best people that I could to make sure that when we get audited, everything is good to go. So anyway, and we can't sign and take your assets. We have no legal right to do that. They are bankruptcy remote in the custody that we have. You're a signer on the accounts. They can't be removed without your permission. Done everything that I can to make sure that you still have a lot of control. All of our clients have a lot of control over their assets. Anyway, scrolling on down here. This is rough, and I hope this doesn't happen. So Jay Taylor says, if they ever passed the 25% on unrealized capital gains and I held all my assets crypto in a cold wallet, is there any way for them to track my unrealized gains? I can't see how they could. Jay, I would have thought you were right prior to February of this year. When we met with MasterCard, they know every single transaction that, unless it's Monero. So let me preface that. If it's Zcash or Monero, you're probably going to be okay. Anything else, they're going to know. They know where you bought it on the exchange. They know what bank account it came from. They know where the funds came from. They know all of it. MasterCard has this down to some crazy technology over there at MasterCard for the banks. So yes, they will absolutely know where you bought it, what the assets are worth now, and you will get a tax bill for those unrealized capital gains if that's passed. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that would cause people. And that's only for people that have north of $100 million. Just so you're aware. Again, like I said before, I think that puts a cap on capitalism. I think it would cause people that are centimillionaires and billionaires to just peace out of the U.S. You don't want that. The people that are able to aggregate that amount of wealth and generate that much value, that's what it is. They're generating that much value for other people. You don't want to cap those people. I would rather our tax dollars go to those people. And the people are going to be like, what? What do you mean? They know how to allocate capital and appropriate it correctly to generate value. Period. Otherwise, they wouldn't be that wealthy. They're investing in companies. They're providing liquidity in credit markets or debt markets. They're putting that capital to work somewhere that's benefiting the larger society. Our government does not know how to appropriate capital. And they're not beholden. They can just print more of it. And that's what's caused a lot of the problems that we have. So I wish more of those people would run for positions in at the Fed or the Treasury or other government offices. That's not going to happen again. That's kind of another byproduct of capitalism, is you can make a lot more money in the private sector versus the public sector. But anyway, I'm rambling on here again, as I normally do. I don't think that that's going to get passed, but if it did, they definitely know who has what. I promise you. Let's see here. He says, "Thanks, appreciate all your knowledge." Absolutely. And I don't like that. Like we met with MasterCard, and I was like, "Oh, wow, this is crazy." But they showed us that they have the product. So, he says, even from Bitcoin ATMs and then transferred to XRP in a cold wallet, you still had to go from BTC to XRP at some point. Even if you went through the DEX, it's they can trace it back. I hate that, but they can. Scrolling up here a little bit, see if there's anything else I want to let you guys know before we close it up for tonight. Chris Burns says, seems weird talking about setting taxes with XRP when it's sitting at 50 cent range and has for years. I'm with you, Chris. It's been frustrating, especially with just all the research that really qualified and intelligent people have done and all the things that they've found, and then to have it sit there and big news and other things come out doesn't move price. That's where it needs to sit right now to be able to provide liquidity to the transactions that are being done with it. When it's needed, it's not going to be at 50 cents. I'll tell you that. But until it's needed, that's probably where she's going to sit for a little while longer. So, anyway, I'm with you. Again, I just want people to be proactive and be thinking about it. Maybe it's not something you get 10,000 XRP, just sit on it. Just sit on your hands. If you're in another jurisdiction that's under the, I can't think of them. It's at the Parliament. It's under the Queen. Well, it's King now, King Charles. Those jurisdictions you probably want to do something beforehand, but most everywhere else in the world you can kind of hang tight. Canada especially. Canada, like, if you're not going to sell it, you're good, because they have no cap on lifetime gift tax there in Canada. You can get your assets offshore post price appreciation if you needed to. Jeffrey asks if we will custody SafeMoon. I don't think Anchorage has SafeMoon, unfortunately. Mighty Tone says, I'm glad you don't subscribe to doomsday scenarios. However, what is the longest, in your opinion, that they can drag out, aka price appreciation for XRP, and like coins via utility? I've been surprised they've been able to drag it this long. As long as they can print money and manipulate interest rates, they can drag it. The problem is counterparties. So Japan, China, Russia, BRICS nations, they're done putting up with it. They are on a timeline, and it may not be the U.S.'s timeline, but the U.S. is going to be beholden to their timeline. And I don't think that's too far from now. So it's when Japan decides, is really at the end of the day what it's going to be. When Japan decides this needs to go, and HSBC and the other people that are over there with the SBI, when they decide it's time, it'll be time. All right. Well, I'm going to take this one because I see Codius here. Do you see the drama from Jungle, Karen, and we'd say over smart contracts? Get the impression Hooks isn't good enough. Codius. Codius is something completely separate from Hooks. It's for the derivatives market, and it won't be native to the XRP. It'll be a layer 2. that'll utilize XRP to settle. So hooks would be on the mainnet. There's always going to be people that have stuff to say. There's always going to be people that argue about stuff and have time to worry about it and complain. I don't have time to worry about it. I'm too busy trying to build and create value and do other things. I don't have time to complain or talk about other people. Anybody that I've seen that is working hard and building things, they don't have time to poo-poo whatever's going on. They just accept it and they go, okay, this is what it is, and they move on. I like Wietse. I do think that Ripple may have done him a little bit dirty. I think that he's been super pro XRP. He built out the Zum wallet, hooks, and all that side. I could see why he might be upset because he's literally involved with the creation of it, and it's his company, and it's part of what he's built. Jungle and Karen, just look. Again, I don't have time to talk bad about people. So I could see why we'd say the other ones, they need to just start doing something more productive with their time. Hooks is good enough, in my opinion. I think that it's great as a smart contract solution. I do think that it'll probably be integrated with the mainnet at some point because it's needed for CBDCs and other things that Ripple is going to need on the mainnet. Codius, I think that'll come a little bit later. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's here in 2024, the year of the dragon. If you go on their website, it says it expects dragons. So I don't know if that matters or not. But anyway, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Thank you for hopping in here on a Wednesday night and listening to me ramble about things and asking fantastic questions. If you do want to reach out to me or my team, you can go to digitalfamilyoffice.io. If you want to work with our wealth management group at Digital Wealth Partners, it's that easy, digitalwealthpartners.net. And if you do want to be part of the mastermind community, I've done this the last couple times. You can check it out for a free month. You just put in Beyond Broke, all capitals, 1MO at checkout. The website for that is mastermind.beyondbroke.com. Fantastic community there. I didn't get to rave about them as much as I normally do on here tonight. But we do run private investments there as well, just like I mentioned about the 506Bs. So with that, we will wrap it up. Y'all have a wonderful evening, a wonderful week, and we will see y'all on the next one.